If you like this video, hit the subscribe button. It's easy to make a YouTube account so you can be a subscriber. And it's free. So I'm buying struts for the front of the HHR. Passing on these, because these you gotta have a spring compressor to change a spring. And I'm going with these. These were not out of stock, although they might be out of stock now because I think I just bought the last two, left and right. These come pre-assembled, which makes replacing them a breeze. 2 bolts down here, 3 bolts up here, and done. Part numbers are G57047 and G5048, because you always change these things in pairs. Check out the reviews. Rob says, I will only use Gabriel preloaded struts. They always fit correct, are of good quality at a fair price. Bobby, this is one of the easiest strut replacements I've ever done. It was on a Chevy HHR. Strongly recommend that you replace the complete assembly. Car rides like new and clunking noise is gone now. That's exactly what I have, is clunking noise on both sides. And it's been more than 100,000 miles since I changed them. This is only the second pair. And they have a limited lifetime warranty, so I am keeping the receipt on these. Really? Nowhere on this box or any instructions does this say which part goes on which side. Not on this. They do have a good warning though. Not on this sheet. Tells you some general guidelines on how to replace it. And there's even different part number than what's on the box. That's not confusing at all, Gabriel. So your only other option here is to go back to the website and see which part number is for which side. If you can trust it. I trust it, and it usually works out fine. Yeah, doing car repairs in the dark again. If you want to do your own car repairs, you just gotta have the know-how, the will, tools, which don't have to be the best, most expensive tools. They just got to be tools that don't round off your nuts or your bolts and don't break. Jack stand underneath the frame, very important. Jack under a frame portion, not the floor pan. If you can hear that creaking noise every once in a while, that is the jack going down just a little bit. Number one reason why I use a jack stand. Alright, there it goes. These are a ball and socket joint here. And when you try and take this off, what normally happens is this wants to turn with it and it won't come off. Same with the bottom one. When that happens, you just got to get creative and see what works. Let's see how it goes. Top bolt, nut rather, and bottom nut are 18 millimeter. Follow your manual, because this is going to involve leaving the car on the jack stand and moving the hydraulic jack to support the lower control arm. Because when you take these bolts out, and they're not going to want to come out easy unless you take the weight off the lower control arm. While you're in here, clean up your CV axle boots here and here. Get the dirt out from in between. Just clean them up real good. Put some sort of rubber preservative on there. I use Armor All or whatever I have. And same with your steering rack boot. That is, I'm gonna say, the main reason why these CV axles and the steering rack boots are 11 years old and still in good shape and not torn, where I've seen some tear and just sling grease everywhere, which leads to a CV axle replacement. Always hit your bolts, threads with some WD-40 before you do something like this. I don't live in the Rust Belt, because this could be a lot worse. There's like no rust on this car, none. One reason why I'm keeping it. Anyway, that'll help out. Also, while you're in here, inspect your brake pads. There's plenty of meat left on these. That lets me know I don't need to worry about brakes for a while. At least not pads. The master cylinder is original from 2006. Probably should be replaced. Breaking out the big guns for this one. And we have that problem that I spoke of earlier. Here we go. Okay, if this happens, 18 millimeter wrench right on the back side. There's a nut back there, and you'll be able to hold this. Put your air ratchet on here if you got one, your impact wrench, and then get it off that way. That made quick work of it. We can get this out of the way when we get the lower control arm supported. Okay, lower control arm supported. This comes right out. There you go, that out of the way. Now I got these two bolts down here. Being careful with this brake harness, electrical harness, and then got the 3 bolts at the top, which are right there. Those 3 bolts, and then this center part will just drop right out, and then the new one will go right in. If you're doing this on an HHR, you're going to have access issues with this back bolt, and the last thing you want to do is put a wrench on this to try and get this out, because it's going to take you forever. You want to use an extension and a ratchet, just like on the other bolts, which I've already taken off. And on this particular car, I drilled a hole big enough for the extension to get through right above that bolt. So this goes right down on it. And with a 13 millimeter, which is what these are, deep well socket, because it's deep. Standard socket, it's shorter. For those of you who don't know, here's a tip. Now I've got to get these bolts out. I got the bolts out of the top. I got to get these bolts out of here in order to take the strut off of this spindle. So I got to get these bolts out. They don't want to come out on their own. So rather than hitting the end of this possibly messing up those threads, take your nut that you took off, put it on. I may have already messed up those threads. There we go. Put it on, and now hit it. Just don't run it down past the thread, so when you're hitting it, you're actually hitting the nut and it's transferring the impact through the threads instead of right at the end of the threads, because you'll just flatten them out. You'll never get a nut on there and you won't be happy with yourself. According to AutoZone's website, 57047 is the driver's side, 48 is the passenger side. Drivers, just in case you didn't know, these are self-locking nuts. They have a nylon insert that gives it a self-locking feature so they don't break out. They don't back out or break out, and they come with a expanded base that acts as a washer, so that's really good. A word about torque wrenches. This is a 1/2-inch drive, foot-pounds torque wrench. There are also smaller 3/8 drive, inch-pounds torque wrenches. Mostly everything in these books is torque to foot-pounds. There are some lighter applications like intake manifolds on some of the older cars, and even some of the newer that take inch-pound torque wrenches. There's a conversion for that. Pretty sure you take the number divided by 12 to get foot-pounds. Don't quote me on that. Check it out for yourself. But torque wrench has your settings here. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but it just loosen the bottom, turn it to the setting, get it just under the setting that you want, and then lock it down. For this particular torque wrench, there might be some other models, like there are electronic torque wrenches that have a beep sound when you reach the right torque, and also some that have a dial on the top with a little rod that bends when you get to the right spot. I don't trust those so much. And technically, these are supposed to be calibrated every so often. Don't ask me how often. I've had this torque wrench for probably 20 years. I've never had it calibrated, and nothing I've ever torqued with it has ever had an issue, so it's probably pretty close. The important thing is, when you're done with this, that you unlock it, you turn this down to the lowest setting, which is 0, and you lock it down, and that's how you store it. You don't want to store this at its torque setting, because it's like under tension, and that will cause inaccurate torque settings. So that would require the calibration. So always set this down to lowest setting and you'll be fine for storage. Okay, the new strut is in. It just goes out, or it goes back in exactly the way it came out, reverse order. Remember that this has got the nut on the back side, which makes it easy to take that off. And don't forget your wiring harness. It'd be very easy to put this back together and then find you've got the wiring harness bracket still sitting to the side. So make sure that you get that on. It goes right there underneath the nuts, these nuts, and then make sure that you tighten it down to torque specs if you're going to torque it, otherwise get it tight. Don't forget these bolts up here. Just get them tight and make sure you torque it. This is the last pair of struts this car will get. From me, anyway.